Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Asheville City Council meeting. Back once again, live and in person. Hopefully this time it'll stick. If you could all begin by rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. A few items first. The item concerning the appointments to the Reparations Commission will be moved to our next council meeting. We are working with, as you may or may not know, there are several seats on the commission that are actually appointed directly by neighborhoods themselves. And we are working with the neighborhoods to get some additional information that needed to be completed and submitted to us for the final nominations. So at our next meeting, we'll be able to complete the neighborhood appointments along with the city council appointments, and the county commissioners have their own process for their appointments. So that item at the end of the agenda, and I will try to announce that later in the meeting as well, will not be heard today. Under good news, we have some, well, first, let me remind you to mute your cell phones, and also, if you need a parking sticker because you parked in the Civic Center parking garage, and if the machines are working, which they may not be working anyway, but if they are working and you need a sticker, you can get one at the sign-in table where you came in earlier this evening. And if you want to speak on any item on our agenda, you are absolutely welcome to do so. And we just ask that you sign in at the table, which will be open throughout the meeting. So you can go back there if you decide you wanted to sign up something, you forgot to sign up for it, or you just change your mind, feel free to go back there and sign up, and they will continue to bring me sign up sheets as we move along. Okay, to begin with, I would like to recognize our own Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley. She was one of 4 women who has been selected as a recipient of the annual Rosa Parks Award that is given by the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Association of Asheville and Buncombe County. Yay. The award honors women in the community who are fulfilled 4 criteria, including fostering a culture of inclusion in the Asheville community, working to achieve a just society for the disadvantaged, exemplifying a nonviolent philosophy in pursuit of a better life for non-majority people, and inspiring direct action in the cause of social justice. Councilwoman Mosley has been a force in the community for improving affordable housing, supporting Black businesses, and eliminating racial opportunity gaps in local schools. So thank you. And I would like to note there were 3 other women who were recognized. Kathy Avery, the founder and owner of Avery Health Education and Consulting. Sophie Dixon, a leader in the Shiloh community, and Dr. Thais Ruffin, the Director of Africana Studies and Professor of Africana Studies and Education at UNC Asheville. Okay, if I didn't forget any of my other things I was supposed to remember, I'm looking at our clerk, make sure. We'll move into the consent agenda, and we have a request by Councilwoman Roney to remove item H so that we can discuss it a little bit before we vote on it. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda excluding item H?
I'll move.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Gwen.
Okay. All right, are there any questions from council members before I ask for any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, we have 1 person signed up to speak under the consent agenda. And that is Nina Tovish. And just as a reminder, since we're all getting back into the swing of things, you have 3 minutes to speak. And if you signed up, so I've already said your name, so you have to introduce yourself.
Good evening, council members. It's a pleasure to be back with you in person. My comment is brief. I just want to say that I noted item B on the consent agenda, which is the renewal of the ground lease for the Oakley Library. And I want to say that that's a testament to the community that rallied around the Oakley Library to save it from consolidation with libraries that were going to be not easily accessible to the local public. One thought that arises for me around this is about the use of consultants who might have learned about the strong regard in which the whole Oakley Library is held before making the recommendation to consolidate it with library on, divided from that community by large highways and roads. So I would urge you, if you're hiring outside consultants, please, as part of your due diligence, require that they contact community organizations in order to gather their input before making their recommendations. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Okay, we don't have anyone else signed up to speak under the consent agenda. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda except item H, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Do I have a motion to approve item H before we discuss it?
So,
Okay, did that confuse you guys? Go ahead.
my second. And I seconded.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Do we have a staff person who could just explain a little bit about item H? This is the $1 million to be allocated to a fund, Step Up on Second Street.
Absolutely. Nikki Reed with the Community and Economic Development Department. And so council had previously authorized a contract with Step Up back in December and funded a third of the total contract amount with ARPA funding. Staff went back and identified available funding to support this affordable housing development. The $1 million asked there from our affordable housing CIP. And so that is what we're presenting tonight for available funding to support the entire contract.
My question,
I was just going to elaborate a little bit more so folks know. This is concerning the Ramada Inn and the assignment of the purchase contract for the Ramada Inn to the entity out of California called Shangri-La, who's going to convert it to permanent supportive housing. And Step Up on Second Street is actually the entity that provides the supportive piece of the supportive housing. And this is housing that is specifically targeted to help folks who are experiencing homelessness move into supportive housing.
Correct. And homeless veterans as well.
so my question is around the funding piece, of course. So are we using our most restricted funds? And why do we see just one fund pool instead of potentially multiple if there are other restricted funds that perhaps wouldn't meet the full $1 million?
Do you, I don't know if
For
Tony's still
example, our
here, but-
bond funds.
Absolutely. I think the bond funds were not available for this use because this is a service contract in its form. So those bond funds are restricted through the bond count, through the bond language to be used for construction. So in this case, with this particular agreement, all of the capital improvements associated with the conversion of the Ramada into permanent supportive housing are funded privately. So really it's the supportive services that needed to be funded. And looking at our array of funding, this was the best possible fit.
Thank you.
And just to explain, my upcoming no vote, you recall that I voted against the assignment of the real estate contract to the for-profit entity. And in keeping with that objection, I'll be voting no on this again this evening.
Okay, are there any other questions, council? All right, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those, sorry, let's do it again. How about all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, thank you. You good with that? Just the one opposed? Yeah, okay. Okay, tonight we do not have any presentations and reports on our agenda, but we do have two public hearing items. And first is a public hearing to consider conditionally zoning multiple properties located at 363 Klingman Avenue, 32 Klingman Avenue, 9999 Klingman Avenue, 9999 Hilliard Avenue, and 9999 Pearl Street from Central Business District to Central Business Expansion District conditional zone. And again, if you change your mind and you decide you want to speak on this and you didn't sign up, please just go back to the table and sign up and we will get you in here. And introducing our brand new planner, Will Palmquist, did I say it right?
You said it perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, who hails from, most recently from Richmond, and we welcome him here tonight for his debut appearance.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mayor. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Will Palmquist with the Planning and Urban Design Department, and I'll be giving the presentation for this request to conditionally rezone 9 parcels at the address of 363 Hilliard Avenue. This slide shows the existing CBD zoning and then the proposed CBD expansion zoning. Due to the size of the project, both the number of dwelling units and the square footage, a conditional rezoning to an expansion district is required. The future land use for the properties in the Living Asheville comprehensive plan is downtown. Here you can see the aerial imagery of the site. The existing uses are 2 one-story warehouse structures, parking, and then vacant lots. Just to the north on Klingman Avenue is the U.S. Postal Service fleet maintenance facility, and then to the kind of north overall on Patton Avenue is a relatively new apartment project that was done by this same developer team a couple of years ago. And here on the site plan, you can see some more details about the project and how it's broken out between 2 separate structures. Between the 2, there will be proposed 187 residential dwelling units, as well as commercial and amenity and leasing space. Building 1, which is on the left, the larger of the buildings, is proposed to be 5 stories, and it will have the commercial and amenity leasing space on Hilliard Avenue. Building 2 is 3 stories and residential only with 28 units proposed. Of those 187 residential units, 5% are proposed to be affordable at 80% AMI. There's also about 200 off-street parking spaces proposed, 67 of which are going to be covered under the building, kind of tucked under the building so they're not visible from Klingman Avenue. Also, there will be 10-foot wide sidewalks and bike lanes on Hilliard Avenue as part of this project. Vehicular access to this parking area behind the buildings will be via Hilliard Avenue and Pearl Street. And the project is proposing to close 1 public alley, which is known as Klingman Avenue Rear, just to the north between this proposed project and the U.S. Postal Service property. And here are just some building elevations. This is the Hilliard Avenue elevation with the commercial and amenity spaces on the ground floor. The Klingman Avenue elevation, which ranges from 4 to 5 stories with the slope of the street, as seen from the parking lot. Around the corner on Klingman Avenue, kind of across from the U.S. Postal Service property. And this is the Hilliard Avenue elevation of the second building, building number 2, the residential only 3-story building, and then the side elevation on Pearl Street. The applicants also provide a number of perspectives to give some sense of how the project will look when it's finished. Corner of Klingman and Hilliard, and then there's a few views of Klingman Avenue, as well as Hilliard Avenue. And then the view of building number 2 from the corner of Hilliard Avenue and Pearl Street looking west down Hilliard Avenue. So in regards to the project's compatibility with the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan, the staff finds that the project is consistent with the future land use map. The project also encourages responsible growth by providing infill development in targeted growth areas, increases the supply of affordable housing options downtown, and makes streets more walkable, comfortable, and connected by supporting multimodal transportation. As envisioned in the 2000 We Can Citizens Master Plan, which envisioned that Klingman Avenue between Hilliard and Patton Avenues would be a mixed-use residential and commercial street, which this project will help to realize with the mixed use and commercial uses being proposed on the ground floor. And this project's been reviewed quite a bit. I won't go through each one of these, but essentially had a lot of feedback and either informal or formal review by both the Design Review Committee and the Downtown Commission. The formal review at the Design Review Committee on January 20th voted to not recommend approval for the project, and the project was pretty significantly redesigned to address a lot of the concerns that were raised by the committee at that meeting. And in between, and leading up to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on February 2nd, it was approved unanimously there. They just came back last week, actually, to Design Review for kind of an informal, called it a courtesy review, just to get informal comments about the new design of the project. And the committee supported the new design of the project at that review. And there are a number of conditions associated with this project. This highlights some of the more significant ones. There is one technical modification being requested as part of this conditional rezoning, which regards the street level facade openings along Klingman Avenue for building number 1 and Pearl Street for building number 2. There's also conditions that 5% of the units, or 9 units total, will be affordable at or below 80% AMI for 20 years. 5 of these affordable units will accept housing choice HUD vouchers. The project will provide 10-foot wide sidewalks along Klingman Avenue, Hilliard Avenue, and Pearl Street. They will also restripe Hilliard Avenue to provide bike lanes running both east and west, as well as a left turn lane on Hilliard Avenue eastbound onto Pearl Street to help with any queuing issues with vehicles. The closing of the northern alley will also allow for a pedestrian access easement to at least allow pedestrian access through that in the future. And the project also proposes burying of above ground utility lines that abut the property along Klingman and Hilliard Avenues. Therefore, staff concurs with the Planning and Zoning Commission and recommends approval of the proposed conditional zoning. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know we also have representatives from the development team with us tonight that could be glad to answer questions, I'm sure, as well.
Any questions? And did you have a question? No? Okay. No questions? Does the applicant want to address the council?
I would.
Okay.
You can go right to the desktop. Is it already on there?
Madam Mayor, members of council, it's a real privilege to be with you tonight in person. We appreciate this opportunity. I'm Wyatt Stevens. I represent Delray Ventures, the developer of this project. And we're here today about what I consider to be one of the more exciting projects that have come before the city of Asheville in recent years. This is a project that will anchor new development on the western edge of downtown, an area that we know we're having problems with vagrancy and homelessness, and we will bring people that live there that will bring that part of the city back to life. The Weekend neighborhood supports this project. They're right down the road from us, and this is sort of the capstone to all the redevelopment efforts, if you think about it, that have happened in that neighborhood over the last 20 years. Before 2015, my client, a family-owned developer, came up here from Charlotte and partnered with the Shealy family, a local family, to buy what was then just an empty parking lot that had been used for a used car dealership, and built the Patton Apartments, 117 brand new units in a part of town that a lot of people questioned, why would anybody put an apartment there? But they did, and it's been very successful. They saw an opportunity, and that's a picture of the Patton. They saw an opportunity to develop the rest of the site, that required a couple of things. One was acquiring all of those parcels, and you see that in red. And the other was fixing a city storm drain that had been backing up. Now, that was something they had to do for the patent as well, but it had to be done to develop that part of the property. And this section that goes right through where the two new buildings would be, that's where this brand new city storm drain is. The city partnered with my client to make that happen. The city put in $600,000 and Delray spent $1 million. And yeah, that's money already spent, but it's evidence of my client's commitment to the city and willingness to partner with the city to solve a public problem, which was a failing storm drain there on Patton Avenue. The project is expensive to build on because there is a lot of fill on the property. A lot of that fill actually came when the Wall Street parking deck was built. This is an email from the seller of one of the parcels to my client. 20 feet of fill in some locations will have to be removed. The estimate is $500,000. It's a brownfield site. That means that it's contaminated, and they will have to go through a number of mitigation measures. They've already spent about $100,000. They're estimating an additional $300,000 to mitigate that site and make it safe for people to live on. Now, it is true that they will get a tax abatement for a period of 5 years on their property taxes, but they have to front that cost to make that happen, and it's uncertain. But it will never be redeveloped if they don't. They're going to bury power lines. These are the ones you're looking south on Klingman. That's the 360 Hilliard, which is another public-private partnership that the city did with the Cassinger Group that's now open and renting with 40% affordable. But they're at a cost of $500,000. They're going to bury those power lines. So this project started as a big idea, and it got better as it went along. And it got better through working with city staff, through working with the Volunteer Design Review Committee Board and the Volunteer Planning and Zoning Committee to make it as good as it possibly could. They activated it along, this is Klingman Avenue with these stoops that will open out and make it very approachable and walkable. They're gonna do ground level retail, 8,000 square feet of ground level retail. It will just bring pedestrians there. It'll be good for the neighborhood, and it'll be good for the entire block. Delray Ventures happens to be a qualified minority contractor. Daniel Jimenez, who's with me tonight, is second generation Hispanic. His father was born in Panama. Delray has been involved for years with a great initiative that the city of Charlotte has called the Charlotte Business Inclusion Program, where they make, they strive to find minority contractors and minority workers for their projects. It's something I would love to see our city do with our DEI program here, where you can go to a website, you can find the folks that qualify for these certifications, and they've done that. They did that on the patent. Daniel hired a black contractor, Glory Masonry from Charlotte, excellent black-owned masonry contractor, and they have committed, and this is a letter that we sent to each of you, but I wanted the public to see it. They will make affirmative steps to do the same thing they've done in Charlotte, they've done in other communities. They will do that here and make this as inclusive a project as they can. They are also committed to 5% of the units will be deed restricted as affordable. That's 9 units total, 5 of which will accept housing vouchers. That's 9 units that we don't have in the city out of 187 total units that we know we need in the city. And the cost of that affordable housing to the city is zero. Right across the street, the city, between selling 360 Hilliard at below market value to the Cassinger Group, as well as making a $1.4 million 50-year loan at 2% interest, and giving a Luigi grant that totaled $560,000. This is off the city's website. They made that happen, and we as a city, you together with Cassinger Group, created 34 units, but that costs money to do. And the city partnered with them to make that happen. What will come up before you, right after this project, is the Haywood Street Community Development. 45 units of much-needed affordable housing that I strongly urge you to support. Wonderful agency is involved, but it would not happen without this city's support to the tune of $300,000 you've already spent, $1.3 million you will hopefully commit to spend tonight, a $900,000 loan similar to the loan that you gave to the Cassinger Group. They're going to require $2 million from Dogwood Health Trust and at least $750,000 from the county. That's how you make affordable housing happen, is you work together, you bring community partners together, like Dogwood, like the county, and you partner with private developers, in this case Haywood, in our case Delray Ventures. If the city is prepared to relax their Luigi grant and provide for some flexibility in that program to allow for more affordable housing in this project, we will do it in a heartbeat. And if you wanted to make that a condition of approval for this project, we would be absolutely happy to have that conversation. What we can't do is commit to 20% with a Luigi grant because the numbers don't work. So what we are doing is committing to 5% because it's the right thing to do, and it will make for a great project that we know we need. According to the Bowen report, in Buncombe County alone, we're short 5,400 residential units. If you turn this down tonight, you will be saying, you know, goodbye to 187 units, 9 of which are affordable, because chances are good, with interest rates going up and the cost of construction going up, that this project or something like it will not get built for the foreseeable future. The time is now, and I would urge you to support this project, even if you do so on the condition that I proposed. Thank you. I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Wyatt, this is Kim. I have a question. When I look at this level of surface parking, I'm concerned about the contribution to our urban heat island. So can you speak to, for example, what's being done to mitigate stormwater?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have Warren Sugg here. Warren, do you want to speak to that? Warren Sugg of Civil Design Concepts, many of you know him, is our civil engineer on the project, and he can talk about the things that we're doing to try to address that.
Good evening. Warren Sugg, Civil Design Concepts. Your question was around heat idling effect and stormwater. So as part of the reviews with the volunteer groups, there was a lot of push in asking for it above and beyond stormwater. So obviously within the city of Asheville, we'd have to do stormwater controls. Specifically on this site, we added some flumes, we added some stormwater measures that were actually in the islands themselves, as well as looking at some stormwater innovative type things along Hilliard as well. So I hope that answers the question on that.
Thank you.
I think you can help with this one. I note that in the application, you were addressing the tree ordinance. No, that's wrong. I don't have the right word.
Talking about the street trees along Clinton?
Yes,
Yeah,
but you were, in order to be, to conform, you were planting trees, but you're also paying into the fee in lieu. And I guess my question is, I mean, right now, we're having a hard time spending the fee in lieu money because of some litigation issues, et cetera. So my question is, you know, why not fulfill the requirement with trees?
So specifically along street trees along Hilliard and along Klingman. Klingman is a NCDOT roadway. There's always an ongoing discussion on where you can place the actual street tree with their safe recovery zone. So that sort of dictate, and we've had some earlier discussions a year ago when we looked at this site to push those trees away from Klingman. Specifically on Hilliard, there's a number of different right-of-way widths there, and with that, and the need to activate that frontage, we wanted to have those street trees in places where, going back to the stormwater discussion, where we could have some innovative stormwater and we could make up some grade difference. Hilliard has quite a bit of slope and a low point where that storm drain comes through. And with these buildings, it's nice to have them where they don't have such a step going left to right. So we're trying to integrate not only the street trees, but also into the stormwater. And I don't think we've gotten to final determination on fee in lieu. That's usually kind of happens during construction drawings.
And yeah, I think she's really asking about tree canopy,
Yeah, tree canopy.
right? And so what options are there to plant trees on the site? You mentioned that along Klingman, it's a conversation with DOT about whether you can put those street trees there. Have we been able to move them back far enough that we can plant street trees?
We can.
We will have street trees on Klingman.
Yeah, so L101, I don't know if you have that sheet in your packet, but that is a landscape sheet. That's the landscape compliance plan, and that's where we're proposing the street trees and
Warren, if I may, if I understand correctly, if it's an NCDOT street and the speed limit is 35 or higher, the impediments, in this case, a living tree, must be with at least 10 feet from the roadway. And the only exception is a dead tree in the form of a telephone pole, right? So is that the situation? Is that accurate? So in this particular drawing, which I can't quite zoom in enough, you were able to get them 10 feet off the road?
that's correct.
Okay.
So we do have a 10-foot sidewalk along that frontage.
And I would add to that, I mean, if you notice also on the bottom of this drawing, you see, this is something that came up in the design review committee. Stephen Lee Johnson said, hey, you know, we ought to have some more trees. Let's do some more green space. And can you maybe push this back a little bit and give up a little bit of your sidewalk space that, you know, you'd have for people gathering in front of the retail locations? And we did. And you can see all of the trees that are along Hilliard, all of which are outside that 10-foot requirement for DOT, and then again, all along Klingman. You know, plenty of projects would have come to you and said, well, the DOT won't let us put trees. And so we're not going to put trees there. But I mean, you saw the renderings. We want this to be green and lush and beautiful. And then on the inside, this is what Warren was talking about earlier, all of these measures, Stephen Lee and others on the design review committee said, what can you guys do to make it more green? And that's what we did. Now, at the end of the day, if you add all of that up, will we meet those requirements or have to pay a little bit of a fee in lieu? That has yet to be determined, right?
That's correct.
May I ask,
What?
the design, I'm sorry,
I'm sorry.
the design committee had also recommended a green roof, but that wasn't added, right?
Recommended what?
They suggested possibly a green roof as well, but that wasn't added, correct?
That's correct. There is not a green roof in the current plan. That's true.
And Wyatt, can you answer, Esther and I are
Yeah.
asking some questions.
Sure.
Remind me, is there public parking here at all?
No, it's 200 and, well, there is for the retail space, yes.
Okay,
Right. So there's 201 total spaces. Some are covered, some are surface. And, you know, for 187 units, you know, you have to have enough parking for your retail. So yes, the public will be allowed to do it. Now, how they figure out exactly how you mark those and, you know, if you have unit number 50, do you have a space? That detail has yet to be worked out, but clearly there will be some public parking in this. There has to be,
okay.
to get any retail tenants.
Oh,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the other, I mean, you know, just thinking about that neighborhood, the Aston Park tennis community is constantly, you know, sort of discussing lack of parking. Is any of this space, I mean, is that right now being informally used for the Aston Park? Or
You know,
by the Aston Park tennis community? And I mean, is there any,
That's a good
I
question.
don't know that it's your issue, but I'm just kind of asking that from the sense of, I know that that's a big complaint in this area, and so I'm just,
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to ask my client whether people are just parking, like they did down in the River Arts District for a long time. I don't know. I would suggest that, between our site and 360 Hilliard, right across the street, surely there's an opportunity to dedicate some public parking that folks could use. But that would be, a dialogue we'd have to have. But we have not heard, until you mentioned it, we have not heard any concerns expressed by users of that tennis facility that, oh, you're taking away our parking. We haven't heard that. I would know, we also haven't heard any concerns from the cyclists. And we have added, I didn't mention this, but if you look down on the corner here, my client has given up, I think, 3 feet of their property to move inward and create this bike lane that will really make it much safer than what we have right now. And then also, and we didn't really talk about this, but this left-hand turn lane onto Pearl will sort of help with some of the traffic flow issues. We do have a traffic impact analysis that was done. It's been submitted to DOT, and as a condition of approval, anything the DOT wants us to do, of course, we will do. That'll go through TRC. Jeff Moore, former city traffic engineer, did that. He's not available to be here tonight, but I could call him if any of you guys had any questions or concerns about the traffic. But his report speaks for itself. But there's a lot of traffic that goes through there, but this does not materially make it any worse. And what we've done with the right in and right out from this entrance and exit, addresses some of that, and then this left-hand turn onto Pearl, does that as well.
I have a question along that vein.
Yeah.
We know that, and we've heard from residents that the traffic that backs up along Hilliard, particularly in the afternoon, starting at 3 o'clock, is already quite complicated. And is there a reason that you did not create an ingress egress on the Klingman Avenue frontage?
Yeah, you want to speak to that, Warren?
So Klingman, a lot like Hilliard, is a key pedestrian way, and not only that part, which is in and of itself a discussion, if you were to look at where the existing right-of-way is to the north, that begins to be the area where you start to see the dedicated right and left turn lane that goes down onto 240, and also is your major movement onto Patton. So there was some discussion in one of the DRCs about doing that, and I think not only at a staff level, but also the design group just didn't think that was the best use of access into it.
And I would say also, remember this project also has access on on Pearl Street. So, plenty of folks who will reside there, will drive all the way up to Patton, come down and then take a right on Pearl and then enter through the backside. And then of course exit out from Pearl Street or come up around that way. Folks tend to find their way around the traffic jams. And again, according to Jeff Moore, yes, there's a lot of traffic at that intersection at certain times of day, but this is not a material increase. They measure that in terms of length of delay, if you will, at traffic lights, and it was really de minimis.
I do have one last comment. We've mentioned the design review committee several times in this, and I want to make sure that those of you listening at home understand this is the design review committee that's only recently been started. It's 6 or 8 months old, I'm not even sure, but they did a tremendous job, and they did this community a tremendous service in their volunteering. It went back to this committee 4 times, and design dramatically changed. And I just wanted to make sure that we thank our volunteers for taking on this new initiative, and also express my appreciation to staff for bringing that initiative, because this design review committee, I used to sit on the downtown commission where we reviewed all these, and this committee has an expertise that has been able to bring us a much more attractive and functional project, and I wanted to make sure that we thank them.
Yeah, I want to do that too. It's not an easy process if you're a designer to go through that and have your work criticized, but we know in the city we need attractive buildings like we have had in the past, because these buildings we're all going to have to live with for many years. And I really commend both the design team and the architects involved, but as well as our volunteer design review committee of professionals who spent a tremendous amount of their own time to make this a better project. I would commend my client for not coming in and doing what he could have done, which was build a building 3 times this tall would have been allowed in the downtown district. He wanted to build something, they wanted to build something that was of scale. And then when they went through the design and review committee, they said, okay, but we still need to break up the massing. And that's what you see right there in that image. And you see it on Hilliard as well. You see this this sense of place is the term of art that you hear, that we heard in design and review committee. And that's what we tried to do. And, you can get a sense here of the bike lane. I mean, this is a project that we should all be proud of. And I would urge that you approve it.
We do on council get, every so often folks say, why can't you, you more tightly regulate what the look and appearance is of every building that's constructed? And that is a challenge because there are limitations in North Carolina around how much control there is. But the design review committee may be our solution. So that is helpful. And, in terms of the height, why you mentioned your last comment, I mean, it seems to me that apartment construction in North Carolina is very much driven by the building code more than anything, because once you get higher, taller buildings, you're looking at a great deal more expense to comply with the requirements of the building code. And so I see why developers are motivated to build within certain height limitations. I mean, you go to any city now, you kind of see very similar construction, and that's, as far as I can tell, driven a lot by the cost and the interplay with the building code. Just throwing that out there, because I remember way back in the day when the downtown master plan was adopted, there was a whole discussion around height and incentivizing urban infill, and it seems like the only developer who can afford a return on a higher building is a hotelier, apparently, in this economy. So that's what we're seeing. Council, we have one person signed up to speak under this item. Is there anyone have any questions or comments before we hear from the public?
Did we at any point hear the future tax value? I understood there was a brownfields and you would get a 5-year abatement, but so you must know what that number is. No? An estimated future.
The estimated abatement, about $500,000 over 5 years, is what I'm told.
100 of each year.
Yeah, it's the way it works. You get back
Steps.
90% the first year, and then it drops down. So, but if you add it all the way up, a total of about 500,000.
Thank you.
Why, how the abatement, the abatement is funded, it's a state program, right? It's not, or is it
Yeah,
our property taxes?
I am not an expert on that, but I talked to my partner this morning, Billy Clark. As I understand it, and the law is what it is, but it actually is mandated by the state to incentivize this, the brownfields, restoration, if you will. And so it affects the ad valorem local taxes. So it's not money coming from the state, it's money that the city of the county won't get full amount on the increased value for that period of 5 years on a declining basis. I think that's how it works.
It's so the state tells us that.
So
Once again,
for
yeah.
5 years, the city doesn't get 500,000.
No,
Yeah,
right,
think-
but it's a step down, so
100,000
it's like
each.
90%. then
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
like,
percent.
90% the first year, and then it drops down to some small amount. Mr. Branham could give you the details, but that's my understanding of it.
And it's what we affectionately call DENR, the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, that manages that program.
It may be, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that. I think that is generally how the program works, and I won't pretend to be an expert completely on the state tax system around brownfields, but generally it is local ad valorem taxes, those are property taxes. That's obviously part of our local revenue stream, and it is a tiered system so that most of that tax benefit is in your first year, and then that comes down such that there is no benefit after 5 years.
And I was just wondering, Wyatt.
Yes, ma'am.
If you can give us an idea, what type of tax revenue would this unit bring to the
Yeah,
city?
that's a great question. What do you have an estimated total value? Okay, according to my client, Daniel Jimenez, there's an estimated city taxes, which is a function of the total increased value, of about $200,000 a year. Don't quote me on that. It'll be what it is, right? So you take this existing piece of property that has a value, these collective parcels, and then you add, a lot of investment, and you've increased the value. And other than this property tax abatement because of the brownfields restoration, other than that, you've got an ongoing income stream to the city of Asheville to the tune of millions of dollars if you approve this project. Thank
Mr.
you.
Stevens, is that brownfields tax abatement issue tied to possibly why your client didn't seek a Luigi land use incentive grant?
No, I first learned about that just yesterday. No, the Luigi grant, we had an active dialogue with Paul D'Angelo about that. And, a Luigi grant for this project would go way longer than 5 years. I mean, it could be, I think on the Tribute project, 17 or 18 years. So it's many magnitudes larger than just this abatement. No, we were very open to a Luigi grant under the former rules, which would be 10%. And I would encourage the city to, take a close look at that program to make it, a little more flexible, depending on the cost of construction, the cost of the site, where you're building it, what you're trying to incentivize, to enable more partnership opportunities for affordable housing, like you did across the street and like you're hopefully getting ready to do with Haywood.
Well, and I think we've now amended it three or four times, but still looking for that workable model. Okay, council, any other questions before we? Good, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have one person signed up to speak under this item, and that, actually, I'm sorry, we have two people signed up, well, no, okay, Wyatt, you signed the sign-up sheet. All right, so we have one person signed up to speak under this, which is Jonathan Wainscott.
Hey, it's nice to see everybody. I just drove up Klingman to get here and was jammed up, as like the #1 person at the green light to get across Hilliard to wait. And the whole cycle, I was the last person, but I was the first because it's completely jammed up. And there's no room there. And we need another lane or something to happen to take the left-hand traffic that needs to get to the highway and all this kind of stuff. Looking at the footprint of all of this, the problem is that you've got the building jammed all the way up to the road. And let's put trees there too. I mean, if you were a tree, would you want to be planted right next to a building? I mean, why can't the building be pushed back a little more? Because the building is as big as it could possibly be already. And the reason that it's not 6 stories is because you wouldn't have enough parking if you made it 6 stories. So I don't see the generosity of, we didn't make it as big as we needed to. Now you made it as absolutely big as you could possibly squeeze that thing in there, and we don't have any room, and we wonder why. I don't know why we don't have the traffic situation kind of figured out first before we put the building on. I don't know if you've also seen the new phenomenon of the Uber and Lyft drivers who have to stop right there, I'm stopping right there, and you don't know who they are, it's not a taxi cab, and they're jamming up all the road, and I got a rickshaw and a pub cycle, and trees, and a bike lane in the middle of the road, which I don't know if anybody else is familiar. You're all familiar with my recent criticism of our road experimentation over there in my beloved Hall Fletcher precinct. It's like, the design process is weird, and it's obvious what's going on here. It's like, why can't you give 10 feet and plant those trees further away? I mean, the little circles that represent the trees are half cut because they're growing up against the building itself. I mean, I know that we want trees, but it's like planting your herb garden right next to the spot that you get out of your truck, and you just, because it's a dumb place to put it. it's not real special architecture. I mean, I guess it's as good as you get these days, but it looks like everything out of Dwell magazine for the last decade. I do like the name. It's the name of one of my sons, Avery, so yay that, but I don't know, man. It's like, I think my kid's more special than that building for sure. Anyway, that's what I gotta say. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, that was the only person we had signed up to speak under this item. Council, any questions, comments, discussion, or a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to approve the conditional zoning request for the property located at 363 Hilliard Avenue from Central Business District to Central Business District Expansion Conditional Zone, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and other adopted plans, and meets the development needs of the community, in that the request, 1, encourages responsible growth by prioritizing development in areas targeted for growth. 2, increases and diversifies the housing supply by providing more affordable housing options downtown. 3, supports the development of an underutilized site. And 4, supports multimodal transportation such as bicycling and walking.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments from council before we vote? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
No.
Aye.
Nay.
Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, all those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay. I know no one's saying anything. We're learning how to be a non-COVID council out here in public in front of everybody. I think we do desperately need more housing in the city, and we are challenged with a robust discussion around what level of development is appropriate for our growing city. I think there is a temptation to say yes to every project that comes before us because we know this housing need exists. But I don't think that means that we have to take every project in every form it's presented in. I do want to see this site developed. I think it is an excellent site for housing, and I hope the applicant is able to come back to us, or a future applicant, with a project that is a good fit.
Mayor, if I may, for those listening at home that may not be familiar with this process, perhaps we could hear from our attorney, Mr. Branham, about what this means. Personally, I would have liked to have seen a developer perhaps request a continuance, then go to that vote, so we might be able to discuss some of the issues we mentioned, but that is no longer possible. Mr. Branham, could you explain what happens now?
Absolutely, Councilwoman Turner. The no vote tonight obviously means that the conditional zoning is not granted, which means the project as proposed cannot proceed. The rights on the property under the current zoning are still available. If any future proposal were to come forward, particularly from the current owner and developer, they would have to wait a full year under our code before they could present a similar project. But again, the existing zoning remains in place, and all of the available development rights thereunder are still there for.
Thank you. Is there some kind of change, if they made a substantial change to the project, they could come back before the 12 months?
It is possible, and we would have to take a look at that. That is a little bit of a detail-driven question, and we would have to see what the changes were. Generally speaking, there would have to be, I think, fairly substantial under the wording of our current ordinance.
Thank you, Brad.
Okay, thank you. That concludes that matter. We have one other public hearing item that has two parts. This is the 343 and 357 West Haywood Street project. And we're going to hear from Nikki Reed, but I mentioned it has two parts. So the first part is the funding piece of it, and the second part is the zoning piece of it. What we'd like to do is have staff present both pieces, and then if there's anyone who signed up to provide public comment, you're able to do it, for the whole project. But we will have to vote, we'll have 2 different votes for this.
Great, thank you. My name is Nikki Reed. I'm the Director of Community Economic Development, and I'm here to present on both the land acquisition request and the Housing Trust Fund request associated with this project. So key takeaways for tonight. So staff believes this is a strategic opportunity to invest in a partner who is offering deep affordability and a community of care in connection with the core services of the Haywood Street community. The project is ideally located near many downtown employment opportunities with good access to transit and essential services. And you'll see later when we look at the financial details that this project leverages partnership funding from both Buncombe County and Dogwood Health Trust pending their approval in March. This project will be deed restricted so as to maintain that permanent affordability, and that will ensure a long-term supply of affordable rental units in Asheville at this particular location. A little bit of background here. The Haywood Street congregation has formed a 501c3 nonprofit. That's Haywood Street Community Development. That's our applicant here tonight. And their intention is to provide permanent affordable housing to the most vulnerable members of our Asheville community. They're partnering with Ward Griffin of Grace Construction, Austin Tyler with Dewey Property Advisors in order to purchase, development, and construct the project. And I think we'll hear more about their property management firm as well. This will be Haywood Street's first effort towards developing permanent residential apartments here in Asheville. And City Council had previously authorized a grant in the amount of $296,000 for due diligence and associated pursuit costs to Haywood Street for this particular project at this location. Was that my timer? Okay. I have more if that's all right. So the concept and location, so it's 0.857 acres, and the parcel, that location address, 343 and 357 West Haywood. Within that 45 affordable units, they have designated approximately 23 units at our deepest level of affordability. That's 30% AMI and below, so very deep affordability there for 23 units. And then 9 units at 60% AMI below and 13 units at 80% and below. So really rounding out a mix of incomes at this location. And it also includes about 5,550 square feet of community space as well. And I think we'll hear more about that later on. There's some property concept location that certainly will be covered through the conditional zoning portion of the discussion, as well as looking at the floor layout. I wanted to really highlight this because what we're seeing in this particular application is not just single family or single bedroom units, but also a mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms. So it allows for families as well at this location. And so here's our budget and funding. So with the total project budget of being $10 million, you can see the funding breakdown here of how they make this project pencil. And so the first commitment that was garnered through the Buncombe County Commissioners was a grant of $749,000. As I said earlier, in March, they'll be going before the Dogwood Health Trust for a $2 million grant to support construction. And then they have a private loan commitment, just over $4 million in a private loan. And then also equity from Haywood Street will be committed in the amount of $809,000. So the city's portion of funding is the $296,000 previously committed through that grant, as well as 1.3 of an affordable housing bond for the land acquisition, and then $904,000 for the housing trust fund loan. So we'll get into that in more detail. So here's the funding terms for the loan. So $904,000, the way that breaks down is no interest and deferred payment for the first 10 years. What we understand from the applicant is that first 10-year period is really important to really stabilize the project, stabilize the occupancy there at the project. Then thereafter, they will begin paying interest at a rate of 1% for the next 10 years. And then at year 20, the loan will either convert to an amortizing loan, therefore paying principal and interest for 30 years at a 1% interest rate, or if they choose to refinance the entire stack at that time, then they would pay off their debt to the city. So really looking at a total loan term of potentially 50 years, but it could be shortened if they choose to pay it off at year 20. And then in terms of the grant for the purchase of the land, that is a $1.3 million purchase price on that piece of property there. And that land will be secured by a deed restriction to ensure that that site is deed restricted for permanent affordability, permanent affordable housing at that site. And so the way we have structured this land agreement is that should the project not come to fruition, then Haywood Street would sell the site and repay the city for this grant amount. And I want to just go back just for a second. I wanted to ensure that it was understood that this particular funding piece, the loan, will be secured by a deed of trust. So that will also be a recorded instrument and will govern the loan terms and carry with this project. So key takeaways: strategic opportunity to partner here for deep affordability and that community of care that Haywood Street represents. Ideal project location near Haywood Street, as well as downtown employment opportunities, access to transit, as well as that partnership with Dogwood Health Trust and Buncombe County. I think that's really what makes this project unique. And also having the ability to restrict the project for permanent affordability to ensure that long-term supply of affordable housing is very important to our overall portfolio of affordability. And with that, I believe we were going to ask for a motion. I can answer questions, or we're going to invite the applicant to speak on their funding request.
Thank you, Nikki, I appreciate it. Can you go back to funding?
Sure.
Sheet? I guess, let me just say, I'm really disappointed that the county's in for $750,000 only. $749, right, not even 750. And, sort of what's the model here? I mean, is it always going to be that the city has to jump in and commit to half the project? I know it's not half, I'm exaggerating. And then the county, we thank them gratefully for a third of our investment. I mean, what's the model here? It was my understanding they were completely all in on affordable housing, and this is permanently affordable housing, deeply affordable, et cetera. And so what sort of stopped them from being into the same level that we are in, and then therefore not requiring, that a pretty extensive loan from an outside banker? Like, what were their concerns, and how come we didn't have the same concerns that the county had, apparently? So that was a really long question and maybe a little bit of a rant, but sorry.
Well, and I think I can talk perhaps in specifics, but then just look at our overarching relationship with the county, because I think when we look back at other partnerships that we've done with the county, Lee Walker Heights is a great example, where we were both in equal footing on funding that gap. And now that was, of course, a low-income tax credit project, right, where the gap was well-known. It had a number of units that was supported by that, so we went in on equal footing with the county. I honestly think we are still working on what partnership looks like with the county long-term. I'm in conversation with their affordable housing point person there to really start thinking through how we partner in a major way with the county. I don't know if I can speak directly on why they chose to fund this amount, but I think that conversation is ongoing, and it's something that we certainly want to continue having those discussions with the county. But I don't know if I can answer that question.
Well, we various ones of us, including me, talk to county commissioners and the chair and periodically, and have had a lot of conversation around this project and other housing projects. And, and I think it's no secret that the county has stated through their subcommittee that concentrates on housing that they're focused on tax credit financed housing. And this is not a tax credit finance project. And where they're at, and it's a very valid point, is that tax credit financed housing, there's a lot more bang for your buck, if you will, in terms of the government subsidy of affordable housing that is supported by tax credit financing, because you're just able to leverage a lot more funds and produce more units. This project is probably too small to be supported by tax credit financing. It's very complicated to do. This partnership is a first timer. So we're seeing something a little bit different here, but the county is, I don't know if they've adopted it as a formal policy, but I think they're going to be focused on at least 4% tax credit financed affordable housing, which is something we also fund as a city as well. We've done we've funded many projects that are 4% and 9% projects. But
has this project ever been a tax credit project? From the
This
beginning?
particular project, no.
Yeah, because I felt like we were all in at the beginning as funding partners. And then we get to this part, the 11th hour, and they give us the $750. So again, what's the
well, and I think
$749? So what changed? Because if it never, if it was never a tax credit project, and we come this far along, then maybe we need some feedback so we can strengthen our partnership and be very clear about what projects they would like to partner fully on, a match.
And I agree, and hopefully, I think that position around the tax credit financing being a piece of their decision to fund projects was an evolving idea that is just gelled up, unfortunately, sort of right as this was happening. And this was sort of and maybe I don't know if you can speak to it more, but this was kind of all right, we'll do this one, but this is the last one. That's sort of what I was hearing from them. So, and I don't know that there was, I think the commission sort of internally had to kind of wrestle with each other and
I'll share.
find a
I'd like to
compromise.
ask a question. When you were saying that basically they were sort of on equal footing with Buncombe County and Leewalker Heights, how much was the cost per unit of the Leewalker Heights as opposed to the cost per unit of what we're doing with Haywood?
I'm afraid I don't know that off the top of my head. I know it was a total 212 units, the city contributing 4.2 million alongside Buncombe County for 4.2 million. Housing Authority also contributed an amount, and I don't have that number off the top of my head. And then they leveraged the tax credit financing to secure the remainder of the funding.
was a
Yes,
nice-
because I was
recall.
under the impression that that was the reason Buncombe County was not too keen on it, was the cost per unit was an issue, especially with affordable housing. So I was just wanting to make sure.
I'll share a little bit about, I reached out to county commissioners about this, and I don't want to speak for them, but what I understood from our conversations was, first of all, we each committed, the city and the county, 4.2 million to what is now Maple Crest, which is about just under 20,000 per unit, 212 units. And the county, I have to give them props. I mean, they haven't always had affordable housing goals or plans or even a committee until the last 2 or 3 years. And I've been involved in our affordable housing committees for a long time. And I think when I got involved 7 or 8 years ago, we were looking at 20,000 per unit subsidy. That was our policy. That was our standard. We didn't go over it. And since then, as prices have gone up, the value of land has gone up, construction costs have gone up, we have adopted a larger amount. And we did our own study with the high impact sites that showed us it would be $80,000 to $100,000 per unit to bring it down to affordable. So I think to this conversation, we're used to, for us, this is a $45,000 per unit ask. Of which a large portion is a loan. But for the county, they were pretty clear, they're looking at tax credit projects, they're looking for that 20 per, and they're used to having county land that is less expensive. So I think as they mature, I think as actually part of this process, what they did was went back to their Affordable Housing Committee and amended their goals to remove 300 or 400 units from that broad goal for these kinds of situations, understanding that not every project they face will be a tax credit project. So to that point, I think we do have a lot of partnership to work on, but I'm thankful that they did partake in some form. And I am ready to make a motion if there are no other questions.
Well, every eager beaver motion, people. We're going to hear about the zoning part first, and then we'll do both. And also, we got to open the public hearing before a motion is made anyway on the zoning piece. So I am appreciative of your eagerness, but let's.
And I think the normal course of process at this point after the funding presentation is to allow the applicant to speak on behalf of the funding piece, and then we'll transition to conditional zoning, if that's.
So we'll hear from Pastor Combs
Okay.
next, and then we'll hear from our planners. Welcome.
Glad to be here. Good evening, Councilwomen. Following HCD last week, I'd like to highlight 5 points and then defer to your questions and comments to guide our discussion. Despite numerous attempts to clarify since we went under contract, there remains some confusion about what we are proposing. What we are not proposing on 343 and 357 West Haywood Street is permanent supportive housing, nor a direct service agency to the wider community, nor a low-barrier shelter. What we are proposing, however, is 45 1-, 2-, and 3-bedroom apartments on the edge of downtown. As Nikki said, these are 100% affordable in perpetuity, and we've asked that the land be deed restricted accordingly. Of all the statistics that are most glaring in the Bowen report, that one that stands out most to me is the need for 24,660 units regionally, half of which need to be at 30% AMI. Following the need, a majority of our apartments are for folks making upwards of $15,000 a year annually who will be voucher holders. And as an interesting note, among voucher holders currently in public housing, 87% are extremely low income, 64% are people of color, 39% are single mothers. Wanting to be good neighbors, Haywood Street has attempted to be exhaustive in our outreach, and we've made nearly 200 contacts via phone, email, and text. We've also had 4 voluntary meetings on site open to the public in addition to our TRC required meeting, and we've created a transparency tracker online so that folks can follow all the dates, all the drawings, and all the decisions. Wanting to always be pursuing a next deal, and you can assume when we come to you next, it will be 100% affordable in perpetuity, focusing on the lowest AMIs. We know that this is our first deal, and we have tried to grow our capacity in a number of ways. Most importantly, we are finalizing a contract with Gibbons Estates to do our property management. They are here with us tonight. They have over 1,500 residents across Asheville and Waynesville, some of whom are low income, and they've got 40 years of experience managing and developing properties. 8 years ago, we partnered with Ward Griffin of Grace Construction as a contractor and a consultant. He's got 20 years of experience and done over 500 transactions. He personally has welcomed voucher holders in his properties and built multifamily. And then finally, at Haywood Street on the congregation side, we have slept overnight in shelters. We have visited in camps. We have blessed keys to single-wide trailers. We have been there for moving day in Aston Towers. We've also lived with people in poverty 24 hours a day, every day of the week in our respite center. And we have spent 12 years on the street, loitering on the corner of poverty, listening to people who need housing the most to inform tonight's proposal. And then finally, equity is not something that's just an important issue to us, it's an essential one. Painfully aware, especially after our experience on Ashland Avenue, of how white supremacy is entrenched in our nation's housing policy, we are committed to prioritize the most displaced and disenfranchised folks first. This is a must. The one way we want to do that is through an aggressive, affirmative, fair housing marketing plan. It's a strategy of outreach among folks who are least likely to apply, and we'll do that in 3 different ways. We'll advertise heavily with sister nonprofits like YMI, like the YWCA, like Ola Carolina, like WNCAP. We'll also leverage our relationships with Black churches in the area, and we will literally go out and hand applications to people in person. We would invite those of you who feel so committed to this issue to take a stack of applications yourself and hand them out to folks who need housing the most. So on behalf of the Haywood Street team, many of whom are here tonight, the WeCan neighbors who have been so supportive all along, and most significantly, the neighbors that need this housing the most, we are grateful for your consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a question. May I ask?
Oh, hold on, don't sit down yet.
Thank you so very much. I greatly appreciate the project you brought before us, but could you maybe give us an idea of how your project differs from the housing, Asheville housing developments? I'm just your model, how is it different?
How's it different than public housing?
Yeah. What are the
We have
outcomes
more
of-
mixed income. It's obviously new stock.
Excuse me? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's mixed income, so we've got 30%, 60% in AMI, so that's a little bit of a difference.
Housing has that. Public
Are you
housing?
talking about public housing?
Yeah, public housing actually have a tier program where basically if once your income increase, then your rent increase. I've actually had clients there that I've actually been able to put them up condos for the same price that they're paying in housing because their income went up.
Most of the public housing that we're interfacing with is primarily 30% AMI. So we want to offer a blended income, again, the focus on voucher housing, it's new stock. We also will have social workers located in the buildings. There are a lot of similarities to public housing, and I continue to commend how hard they are working to get people housing. And we hear this regularly, how long people toil on the wait list, and it literally feels like someone has won the lottery when they get into Bartlett Arms or Klondike or Aston Towers. And we see that that continues to be the biggest need, the folks that public housing are serving.
Yeah, I was just hoping that you could maybe give me some highlights for that particular company, how they've looked at what public housing is doing, and that you've improved on it and given us a better model.
Councilwoman Kilgore, are you asking if they're going to also increase the rent as their income of the resident?
Oh, no, I don't expect that. But as far as the actual product and what it offers, it's very similar to the same thing. And I was just trying to sort of get it, like a lot of people are really concerned with what's going on in public housing. And the reason I say that is because it actually, it doesn't really do what it's supposed to do. I look at public housing as it should have been an interim, sort of in between someone just starting out and moving them to permanent housing. But basically, it's become a place where people just stay. And the business model there does not work. And I think that's a big issue with public housing. So I was hoping that this particular project that you were doing was going to offer us different options as to where you would go with that lower AMI income qualifications and how you would move forward. I was just hoping for a new, different model.
I'm a little confused. Are we assuming because there's a lower AMI that there's going to be problems?
Excuse me?
Are we just naturally assuming that because it's a lower AMI that the community will be more problematic than, say, what was previously?
No, it just so, the similarities to housing are just so stark. I just wanted to see if there was a difference.
I would actually, I don't think it's actually, the analogy would be public housing. It's probably more like mountain housing opportunities or other nonprofits that build affordable housing at various levels. Typically, though, with tax credit financing, which you're struggling with, you don't have that, so you're having to reach out to more resources to help finance it. And a lot of communities have nonprofit affordable housing builders in them, are primary. So I would disagree that this public housing is very different. It's HUD, I mean, the only thing similar might be the vouchers allowable by some residents. I mean.
Well, I was looking for a model that would basically, his model would be more or less assisting people with rent and moving them through the system as opposed to being a place where people just, more or less a transitional housing. That's what I was hoping for. And because people will get stuck in a certain place, and then we've just got 45 units rented for, same type of thing with housing.
Are we assuming that this is only for those who are previously unhoused? I don't understand the difference between what MHO does or any other apartment. I just feel when we're talking 80%, we're not worried about them transitioning out of 80% to 120%.
No, that's not the purpose. That's not the reason. I'm just trying to say what is the difference in it. I just don't see a whole lot of difference in it, but the cost per unit is a whole lot higher. Does that make sense now?
I would argue that the cost per unit is substantially lower than many of the developments we've seen recently, but
not housing.
I mean, I'm not sure what kind of different model you're looking for, or if this project will be the new model goal or something, but I think there are some differences in that there are higher AMIs here than public housing allows, and there is community space and perhaps more services readily available to folks. Is that helping you at all, or?
Well, like I said, you have to look at the housing model as far as people's income. So like I said, plenty of people, their jobs, their income increase, their rent increase. So
I do want to share one thing about the vouchers that is interesting and isn't necessarily transparent in all of these projects. When we approve projects that include the housing choice voucher. What that means, there are really two types of vouchers. You can live within a public housing community, or you can get what we call these housing choice vouchers, where you can take them out into the community and use them in other rentals. And what happens here, so I think the figure is 2,107 people are on the wait list for these housing choice vouchers. And in this case, 23 units, I believe, is that right? 23 units will accept them. But what it really means is 46 families will be helped, because those in the public housing community will be able to use their housing choice voucher, and their space will open up for the next 23. And I think that's something we also see with the Thrive program, if you all are familiar with that. And this is a similar situation. So not only are you helping 1% of the wait list in your project, you're really helping 2%. And I think that's quite remarkable.
This is Kim. I just want to name a young person that I interacted with recently who works full-time in a restaurant, and they can't afford an apartment. And so they were staying in with their family, and their family's lease was threatened because there were too many people in the building. So then this young person who's working full-time will never get inside a shelter that has a curfew in time, because they don't get off work till 10:30 or 11. And so this family plays a cycle of helping this young person camp and have access to their family. Some might say, hey, it's too expensive, you have to leave, which means leaving their entire community of resources. So I think about what it means to invest in our future. I hear young people and working people and compassionate people, people that are important to the fabric of our community, that don't have a place. So many people who have already lost that sense of place. And we have so many wounds to heal. But when I look at this project, and it has been going on for years, there are hours, many hundreds of hours of minds, hearts, and hands. And my hope is that when we see this pulled off, because we have to urgently, that more partners will say, you know what, we need to do this again and again. So I know this has been hard, and I know we're taking some risks, and I know we always want it to be better, but I'm supporting this because it's a step in that direction.
Well, I'm not saying I'm not supporting it. I was just wanting to get some clarification and sort of get a direction of where it was going. I was just concerned with it ending up another housing development. That's all.
Sandra, I actually appreciate your thoughts on this and would love for the housing commissions to talk about this, because to your point of, was it meant to be a forever housing situation? Was it? It's a discussion that needs to be had, probably not in light of this project or before us, but I do understand your what you're getting at.
Well, and if you have those questions, then probably a lot of people have those questions. I mean, you know, we sit here and look at housing all the time, and we are deeply now educated about all the different types of housing, all the different ways to fund the construction of housing, all the different ways to rent and own housing. But that's not something everybody spends all their time looking at. So I think the question is important, you know, because probably a lot of people in the community have the same question.
And Sandra, thank you also for naming that our housing authority neighborhoods are mixed income.
Yeah, they are mixed. Yeah.
Because folks are getting in a place. And sometimes what I'm hearing is folks desire to stay close to community developed in that place too. So there's beauty and joy and community being built in a neighborhood. And I don't want to disregard that is happening in our housing authority neighborhoods.
Well, Pastor Combs, thank you for indulging us in our conversation while you stood there. Do you have anything? He's like, okay. So if there's not, unless you have something more to add to the conversation, we'll hear about the zoning piece of it.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. The item that I'm going to be presenting on is the rezoning application, or the conditional zoning application, for the property located at 343 and 357 West Haywood Street. These are the properties that are on the north side of West Haywood Street, directly adjacent to the I-240 controlled access right-of-way. The subject property includes 2 parcels, totaling approximately 0.86 acres. The property today is zoned Community Business 1. The request is to conditionally rezone the property to Community Business 2 conditional zone. When we look at a rezoning, we also look at the city's future land use map, which is adopted as part of the city's comprehensive plan. And we look to those designations to kind of direct what is our future vision for these properties. In this particular case, the subject properties are designated downtown, which calls for high-density residential, mixed use in areas that are walkable and will complement other downtown uses and surrounding neighborhoods. Because the proposed plan is consistent with this designation, a change in the future land use map will not be required. Looking at the Exhibit B aerial image, you can see that the property today is currently undeveloped, as are the property to the east, west, and north, and you see that controlled access right-of-way for Interstate 240. The property on the west as well as the north, that is the right-of-way. Property to the east is some additional commercially zoned property, and to the south, you enter into what we commonly think of as the West End Klingman Avenue neighborhood. So you have a mix of institutional zoning, which is actually city-owned property, and some RM8, which is the residential community. Moving on to the site plan, the area highlighted in gray represents the building footprint. As you heard earlier, the proposal is to build a single multifamily 4-story building totaling approximately 49,000 square feet. The building will be just under 42 feet tall, providing 45 residential units, all affordable. The project also includes a combination of structured and surface parking, with 35 of those spaces tucked under the first level of the building. So you would access the site from the driveway that's located here in the southwest corner, and you drop down that driveway around to the back of the building, and you can park under the building. And you can see there's also a small bit of surface parking there. Also included is a 10-foot wide, it's a minimum 10-foot wide sidewalk. In parts, it'll be a little bit wider than that, with street trees, as well as some indoor and outdoor community space. Something also that is included in the site plan that's not represented on the plan itself is the applicant has agreed to provide a pedestrian crossing across West Haywood Street. We think this is really important because it not only helps connect this project to the rest of the neighborhood, but it connects to the existing sidewalk on the south side of West Haywood, which then connects to transit stops and onto the downtown. This project is less than a quarter mile from, it's really more like 0.2 of a mile from the edge of the downtown. Looking at the building elevation, you can see the 4 stories and the residential character of the building. There is the primary front entrance located. It looks kind of small in scale, but there's your front entrance, as well as some balconies. So you can see the project is residential in character, and the materials are also typically what we find in our residential communities. The elevation at the rear adds that structured parking underneath. It's that same 4 stories with that additional structure kind of tucked below. It looks a little bit different. It's a different software program that created this rendering, but you can see it's got some color to kind of help represent a conceptual color palette, as well as a mix of materials. This is the side that would be visible from the interstate. The building floor plan, Nikki showed this to you earlier. You enter from the street into a long hallway, and the units are arranged off of that long hallway. I'd also like to point out on the east end here is that community space. So this project includes 2 multi-purpose or community rooms that could be used to support a variety of activities. All of our conditional zonings are examined for alignment with the city's comprehensive plan and other plans. As it relates to the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan, I mentioned earlier, this project is consistent with the future land use designation of downtown. It encourages, or it includes, or represents responsible growth by providing infill development in our targeted growth areas. And in this case, they're providing housing that's in proximity to not just employment, transit, and parks, but to goods and services as well. And so not only does it provide housing, it provides affordable housing, which is one of the city's key goals represented throughout our comprehensive plan. The project also is right on the most northern edge of the West End Clingman Avenue Neighborhood Citizens Master Plan. And that plan calls for small to mid-scale multifamily, pedestrian improvements, and affordable housing, which are all included in this project. This project is not located in the downtown or in a design review area, so it really has just 2 stops before coming to council: the Technical Review Committee, where it was approved with conditions back in December, and the Planning and Zoning Commission, which approved it unanimously back in January. All of our conditional zonings also include a list of project conditions that become part of the approval of the project. These conditions basically describe the project and all of the features and positive aspects that will be included. It will also identify any technical modifications that are requested by the application. In this particular case, we have 3 technical modifications. We're seeing a small increase in the density, building height, and structure size. That represents anywhere from 5 to 9% increase, depending on which of those standards you're looking at. When we look at technical conditions, we also look at what are the features included in the project that might help mitigate or offset any impacts from this project. Some of these mitigating conditions are endemic, or they're kind of built in to the context of the site. Others might be things that we require as part of the application. In this particular case, the subject properties are located directly adjacent to the I-240 interstate. So we're not as concerned about its compatibility against that property as we would be, say, if it were, next to a single-family home. It's also within scale. It's actually smaller than some of the other landmark buildings that we find along the interstate. The Harris Cherokee Center that we're in today, the Hyatt Place, Hotel Indigo, these are all significantly taller, larger buildings visible from the interstate. The project is also consistent with the mass and scale of other projects in our in that downtown future land use area that I mentioned earlier. And those are the kind of contextual mitigating factors that are included in this application. We also have those things that the applicant is committed to through their proposal. So the architecture that takes cues from the existing community, the pedestrian orientation of the building with the wider sidewalks, structured parking with minimal surface parking, and the new pedestrian street crossing that isn't there today. And then, of course, we also look at conditions that help represent or support the city's comprehensive goal. In this particular case, we have the great public benefit of those 45 affordable housing units. And what's not typical that we see in development applications is that not only is it 100%, all of the units, all 45 are affordable, but they're permanently affordable. We do not see that very often, and these are deed restricted units, so they will remain affordable. A substantial portion of those are also deeply affordable units, and that's also something that is hard to achieve. So in conclusion, staff agrees with the Planning and Zoning Commission and recommends approval of the proposed conditional zoning that's before you. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation and be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Okay, we have no one signed up to speak on this item.
Can I get some
I will just
clarity?
say that, I just want to note that's like surprising. But a testament to the applicant for probably talking to every single person multiple times that wanted to talk about this project. So good job with that. Yes, Sadie.
Oh, I just want to make sure I understood the process, so we
First we'll need a motion on.
the funding, right?
Yes, first we need a motion on, item B1, the funding portion of it.
Okay.
So I'm ready for a motion.
I'm ready to make one.
Make a motion.
I am more than thrilled to welcome you to this moment. I know it has been a long road, and I appreciate your tenacity. I make a motion to approve a request by Haywood Street Community Development for $1.3 million in funding to purchase land and a $904,000 Housing Trust Fund loan to construct 45 permanently affordable rental homes on property located at 343 and 357 West Haywood Street in the city of Asheville.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. And before we vote, I'd just like to say, I mean, I don't remember when we first met about this, but I did when it was a seed, and it looked like a long road, and I wasn't sure. So congratulations to Asheville that you're at this point, because we will win, all of us, from you making the incredible effort you've made to get to, and your next one should be like half the time and energy.
And twice the politics, probably.
Right.
I did have one comment before we vote, if that's okay. There is one thing that would just make this so much more joyful. In projects like this in general, if the community that's going to create a neighborhood here and live together and celebrate together and move to and from this place together had a hopefulness of one day cooperatively owning this space, would just be brilliant. So I can't wait to get to support something like that one day.
Go in condo, I believe. Yeah. Okay, council, we have a motion and a second on item B1 on our agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
And I believe,
She was
Yeah, support.
she was late on the aye. Yeah.
and if we don't have any public comment, we can just move to the next
Yes,
motion,
well,
right?
yeah, go ahead and give
Okay,
a motion.
I will
on
motion
it.
to approve the conditional zoning request for the property located at 343, I'm a little excited, sorry. 343-357 West Haywood Street from Community Business CB1 to Community Business 2, conditional zoning, all these letters, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community in that the request, 1, supports infill development in a strategically located area targeted for growth, 2, provides housing units in proximity to transit, employment, and parks, and 3, supports city goals for affordable housing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Questions, comments, anyone? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, congratulations. We have passed the project. All right, folks, we're going to take a break. And we're going to come back at 7 o'clock. It is 6:40. We will come back at 7 o'clock.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. It's been a long day.
Great. Okay, we are resuming the city council meeting. We have one item of unfinished business, and this is actually the second reading, meaning the second vote on an item we already voted on at the last meeting, and for really complicated and slightly boring reasons, you have to vote on it twice at 2 different meetings. And this would be an ordinance granting a franchise agreement to Blue Ridge Rickshaw to operate a pedal bicycle taxi service within the city of Asheville. And staff's already made a presentation on this item, so I don't think we need to hear that again. We don't actually have anyone signed up to speak on it. So unless the applicant wants to add anything, I will entertain a motion on this item. Okay.
Unless you guys have any questions.
So do I have a motion?
I'm ready to move. Do you need me to read the motion in the document?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry. Vice Mayor Smith, did you want to amend that motion?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Hold on, we haven't.
I was gonna let her read, and then I was gonna.
Okay, so,
Hold on, we need, Brad, tell us what order.
So I would like, before you make the motion, I would like to amend the motion to include the requirement that the franchise agreement be considered by council prior to the expiration of the original agreement and each renewal thereof.
Does this require a third vote now?
No.
No.
I think Councilwoman Rowan can include that in the motion, right?
I'm not going to remember that all off the top of my head. Okay. So how about this? I'll read the motion here. If you want to amend it, then I will
I'll tag it.
accept the friendly amendment. I move that we approve an ordinance granting a franchise agreement to Blue Ridge Rickshaw to operate a pedal bicycle taxi service within the city of Asheville.
And that the agreement be considered by council prior to the expiration of the original agreement and the renewal thereof.
Accepted.
Okay, so we got a motion, now I need a second. Anybody? Or nobody? Okay, we have, anybody gonna make a second? Probably someone who
Second.
supports this. All right. Okay,
Second.
it was Gwen. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Unless there's anything further, we're all clear on this. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say aye.
Aye.
Now show your hands, so Megan can count you. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, so
It didn't pass.
it didn't pass.
It didn't pass?
Well, you just,
You just,
okay, did you,
I'm against, I just couldn't
did
count.
you vote, you voted no, right?
Correct.
Correct, okay. Sorry, it's hard to see each other up and down the desk. So what that means is that the motion fails and this item has not been approved. That's what it means.
Who changed their mind?
Okay, that is our last item of unfinished business.
Wasn't expecting that.
Are we good? Any questions about that? Okay. I'm just turning off your mic. Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned before, we are not making the appointments to the Reparation Commission tonight. We are going to move those to the next council meeting. And we have a number of people that have signed up for informal discussion and public comment, but before we get to that, I would like to bring up a couple of things that I'm hoping we can get a little direction around. We don't have these items on our agenda just yet, and in order for us to get some things on our agenda, we need to give some direction to staff if we want to see things come forward to council. And one of the concerns that I have, and that we discussed, that I have talked to some of you all about, and some of you have discussed with each other, as I may be aware, concern the following. One is the general state of cleanliness in the city, not just in the downtown, but in the surrounding area. We have now been through COVID for 2 years. We have a whole lot of different issues going on around cleanliness. And I know a lot of it is, a lack of staffing, and everybody's down on staffing, and we don't have positions filled. I know we have a lack of contractors and so on and so forth. I know DOT for a long time was not keeping up with their normal routine, but we do have, at a later date, we'll be making our ARPA funding decisions, and we do have a city application actually that would address increasing citywide cleanliness. So I bring that up. I'm hopeful that we can incorporate something in that application, which was removed because it didn't rise to the top 3 of the list. So I'm hoping this council can consider that, and then if staff takes a look at that application and feels that it will really address citywide cleanliness. And again, I am not a strong mayor. I can't just make these decisions. These would have to be council-supported funding decisions and direction decisions. Safety. Community-wide safety. We have been hearing from our police department. I've personally met with the chief and command staff, so as the vice mayor and possibly other members of council, and they are working hard to increase their staffing. They're still down, I believe it's 44%. Am I right? I'm looking at the back, yes. And we have increased police salaries and police hiring salaries, levels of hiring, but I personally would like to know if there are other things that we as a council can do to support the police in trying to restaff the police department. They do have a consultant they're working with around recruiting, and this council's already made a decision around that. But if But if there are other things that we're not doing that we need to do to address staffing issues in the police department, I would like to be made aware of them. And I'm thinking along the lines of, is every other jurisdiction paying a signing bonus and we're not? Or is every other jurisdiction paying their captains at some level and we're not? So I would be interested in that. And I do recognize that while we strive to what we call reimagine public safety by doing a lot of work with our city and with our partners around different ways to provide community safety, we still need to remember to support the police department, myself included, and we don't say it enough, and we do need to recognize the sacrifice that they make. And we have met with them, and we're hearing that sort of basic levels of service that the community is expecting. If there's a burglary or whatever happens and you need to call 911, that we're not able to respond to all those calls in a way we used to be able to. So we need to be able to continue to provide community safety in a way that at the levels we were once able to provide. I think we are finding that as we struggle through COVID, it has highlighted for us the crisis around homelessness is incredibly exacerbated. Several things happened all at once. It was a perfect storm. We had shelters that weren't taking people in because of COVID. We had the county lost funding for BHUC, their behavioral health emergency services unit on Biltmore Avenue. We saw a number of things happen that really pushed to the fore our awareness around the crisis that is homelessness in our community. And you'll hear this council, we've talked a lot about long-term solutions, but I think, we're getting, we're learning a lot more about this than we ever did. I mean, if cities in North Carolina don't directly have services to address homelessness, they don't run shelters, we don't have health departments, we don't provide behavioral health or substance abuse counseling, we don't directly provide, workforce training. We don't do that. We have to coordinate all the providers that provide those services, and what we have learned through this crisis is that that is not very well coordinated. It is not established in a coordinated way. So I personally have been touring every facility I can find and talking to every provider I can talk to learn more about what needs to be done. And I know, John Boyle and I like to spar in the paper. There is a lot of eye roll around consultants, and that's warranted. But I do think that we are learning that it's not just a matter of, do you have a homeless shelter? Are you able to feed someone who's homeless? We're learning that it's a lot more complicated than that. It's trying to figure out how to help someone get into services, how to help someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis. Do you need temporary shelter? Do you need long-term housing? Do you need all of those things? Where are your gaps? So we're we're partnering with Dogwood Endowment and the county to do a long-term study around these challenges, but we need some short-term solutions to better address the situation we're facing right now. So I personally would like to look, we're at our retreat next month, and I would personally like to look at thinking about those short-term solutions for what can we do right now while we're planning for the long term to help our community and to help those experiencing homelessness. A Hope Day Center, which is on Ann Street. I know not everyone is tuned into that conversation, but it has really elevated as a challenge for us. This is not our center, but it is Homeward Bounds, which is a strong community partner of the city's. We provide them with a lot of funding to provide services to our community. But the day center, which is a very necessary service in Asheville, is creating incredible challenges on Ann Street that are kind of pouring out into that area of town. And so we have met with the folks at Homeward Bound. They just yesterday released a 90-day plan to try to address some safety issues around there. I met with Jan Davis yesterday to talk about that. I think there's some serious questions about whether or not it will be enough. And we need to continue that conversation. Again, a strong partner of the city's, providing an incredibly needed service to help folks get housed in our community. And so, but we need to also remember, we got to keep all of our communities safe. And an unfortunate result of what's happened with AHOPE, which has been in existence for many, many years, is that we're now seeing the neighboring historically African-American church being pushed out. And that has really brought this issue to a critical head, kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. So we're continuing to work on that, and glad to see Homeward Bound really stepping up and looking for some solutions at this point. So those are some things that are on my mind that are not necessarily on our agenda. And I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that, but just sort of a precursor for where, you know, we might have a more robust discussion around that at the upcoming retreat, but some areas that are coming, that are kind of snapping into focus as we exit COVID, I hope, and see the introduction of spring and, you know, looking at the future vibrancy of our city.
So I think these are all great things to be talking about, and I'm assuming that, you know, this will be a topic at the retreat, or these will be topics at the retreat. Around the cleanliness issue, you know, as I've talked to some other council members and you, Deborah, you know, I'm not sure just an influx of, you know, we're just going to pressure wash more often or something. I mean, I really think we have to look at root cause, like why has this issue, you know, when you look at the city 4 years ago, or you came downtown 4 years ago and you look at the city now, why is it so much, you know, why are we having the issues? And, you know, and again, it's not just downtown, it's all over the place. I mean, there's just litter all over. And so if it's, I'd like to see if we can, and I don't know that anybody really knows, but, you know, see if we can come up with not just throwing resources at it that will have to be forever and ever and ever, versus root cause, like what's going on, and can we do something to address some of those issues, you know, as opposed to, I mean, Esther threw out ARPA funding, which is great, but, you know, 3 years down the road, there's not going to be any ARPA funding. So, you know, are we just going to commit to that forever and ever? So that's the only extra comment I would have.
And the comment I'd like to make is this, is first of all, I do sort of would like to advise council that we need to do a complete cleanup of the city. It's almost like you have to clean the canvas before you can actually start making suggestions as to what direction we will go to ensure the city stays up to par or clean. And that was the reason I was very much very much on board to use ARPA funds to do this. Basically, and with that type of campaign, that we're letting the city know that we are invested in keeping our city clean, and get out and start with a clean slate. And then we can ask the community to come up with ideas of how we can work together to ensure that we keep our city clean. You know, and like I said, we'll take suggestions from anyone in the community of what we can do working together. But the main thing, we need to go ahead and fund a project to get the city clean so people can feel good about the city. Thank you.
And Mayor, I want to thank you for bringing up the historically black church that sits on Ann Street beside AHOPE. I too am grateful to Homeward Bound for the service they've done, and I'm glad that they now have decided to institute security. I appreciate the 90-day plan. I would ask that we see data in 30 days to see what, if any, if it's helped, if it's hurt. And also,
and you're talking about calls for service, the number of calls for service.
Yeah. Also, in our meeting with Mr. Davis yesterday, I won't go into great detail, but he did mention that another organization that works with the unhoused. I see Amy here now. I believe that's Amy, I can't tell. Okay. I love that her organization, they actually have community cleanup opportunities. And I think that would also be another great thing for any organization, because the cleanliness issue, let's be clear, it's not totally the unhoused. I, for one, have been downtown and seen a couple of young ladies, or at least one young lady on her wedding weekend, losing it downtown and making a mess. But, you know, I too agree with the cleanness, and thank you for lifting Sycamore Temple in your comments.
I'll share. I just want to echo that I appreciate you, Mayor, for bringing this up. I know I've been talking with, particular to downtown and West Asheville, some of our larger business corridors, for months about ongoing issues and concerns around safety, around cleanliness, around mental health, around addiction, around crime. I mean, I'm hearing it from all sides, and I think it's risen to the point where we can't not have the conversation. We can't not lean in on what is happening and figure out how we're going to do better. I don't know what that looks like, but I think some of the things we need are, for example, like Councilwoman Mosley said, data on how changes on AHOPE go. I think it's probably time, I don't know where in the schedule of updates we are expecting to hear an update from APD, but it would be nice to hear from the chief. And, you know, if there is, I continually hear that they would like to hear support from council, and I don't know about my fellow councilwomen, but I do support the Asheville Police Department, and it pains me that they are having a problem upstaffing simply because they don't believe they have our support. I don't think any one of us would support some of the awful things that have happened across the nation or in the history on Biltmore Avenue, but it doesn't mean that our police department is a bad thing or a bad entity. And they do deserve our respect and appreciation in many regards. I think the cleanliness issue is interesting. You know, I've been involved in downtown a long time, the boards, the volunteer agencies. We used to do regular cleanups, cigarette butt cleanups. Some of this stuff has fallen by the wayside because of the pandemic and the fear around cleaning up debris simply because of contamination. So I get that. You know, we have average do-gooders that clean up trash as they walk around downtown. Even those folks have stopped. So, you know, I agree with Sandra in that we do need like a infusion of cleanup to kind of clean the slate, and then a better maintenance program perhaps. But as I understand the Public Works Department is down 40%, transportation down 60%, our own police department 44%. So we have a major staffing crisis, much like other cities. I just think we need to be more proactive at this point. And to the way that the mayor has brought this up, I think coming out of the pandemic, moving into spring, realizing that we need to kind of get our act together is probably an appropriate way to do this. We don't need to blame unhoused or blame tourism or anything. We just need to come together and resolve the issues. That's all I'll say.
This is Kim. While we're having this conversation about what was going to lead forward to the retreat, I just want to remind that there are sharps containers that are small enough they can fit on our city trash and recycling facilities. When we're doing community neighborhood cleanups, for example, I've participated in my neighborhood. If you don't have somewhere to put the waste, then it will not have a place to be. So it would be great if we had an infrastructure that is doable and that we intend to maintain. So I would like to consider more sharps containers and a plan to maintain them. Additionally, if we had a place for legal camping to get from where we are to where we're going that would be temporary with staff and infrastructure to support it, then we could diversify our public safety response for the benefit of all of our staff, residents, and visitors. And the last thing, well, Missoula, Montana is doing that. So I would like for us to look at the Missoula, Montana model, see what kind of data they're getting out of the legal temporary camping facility with bathrooms, laundry, transportation, staffing, et cetera. And the last thing is that a neighbor reached out to me and asked about a job opening at the city of Asheville. So I just searched City of Asheville job opening. The highest search engine optimization pulls up the city's HR website. And I noticed that it still had language around a hiring freeze that we had up since January of 2020, as of a couple weeks ago. So I let our staff know, and it has been updated. So evidently we are now hiring. all positions. So that may be one of the contributors to us looking like we're not available and hiring. And I think that's a positive thing, because now if people look, then they would have a reason to submit an application. So I would like to see if that has a net benefit.
We do have some antiquated things on our website that are not current, especially around some of our budgeting items. I didn't realize we had that one. That's pretty critical. So that, yeah, someone needs to do a scrub of our website.
Ms. Ernie, are you done?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, your light's still on. I just wanted to add one more thing for the public and those listening at home. If you have not yet downloaded the Asheville app, that's what it's called, the Asheville app, please get it. There is a list of things that you can report and share and inform the city staff of, one of which is litter. Now, please don't, use the app to report a piece of gum wrapper, but if you see an area that is covered in litter and needs addressed in a bigger way, please use the app. We don't have active workers scouring the city looking for messes necessarily, and if you can help us identify some locations, we can get to them quicker. So please download the app and use litter or trash pickup.
Okay, I see the problem. If you hit the mute button enough, it doesn't actually go on. Do you, Manager Campbell, do you feel like you have enough direction from a majority of council on the items that we just discussed, or do you need clarity around those issues?
No, ma'am, I think I've got enough direction. Thank you.
Okay. And I heard Councilwoman Roney's call around a managed campsite. I am not supportive of that concept at this time for the city. What I understand from our partners is that we do have adequate shelter space. And I know that there are cities that have explored managed campsites. Denver's another one. San Francisco's another one. My understanding was that that was really more of a situation where there wasn't enough shelter space. And I have actually studied those models in those cities because I mean, it's an interesting concept. The key difference is that they have nonprofit providers that are willing to contract with the city to run those campsites, because you have to staff them or they become unsafe immediately, and you have to provide services for them. And so we, as far as I know, we do not have a provider in our community that wants to step into that role. So I don't know what the rest of council feels like in exploring a managed campsite, but I personally, at this point, I don't feel that we have the capacity to look at something like that.
I wonder if we have the capacity to meaningfully address trespassing charges instead. I think we're not providing an answer other than chasing people around with the limited resources we have. Means we're not answering the public safety calls for other issues around the city. So I think there is going to be a cost analysis of the pros and cons, and that's why I would ask that we see what other cities are doing, what outcomes they're getting.
I'll add to that capacity too. I mean, I would love to think we could help everyone every time from everywhere, but I mean, if you were here for the 2:30 budget planning session, you saw lists of things that the city needs and revenues that don't meet them. I mean, at some point we have to talk about what our community can achieve. And I think that's partly, I know there's some frustration around us hiring a consultant, but let's face it, we haven't fixed the issues, we haven't solved homelessness, and we have a wonderful array of amazing partners achieving success within their own programs that don't always communicate to each other, that sometimes overlap in services, but don't help the same people. There's a lot to learn. I've been doing a deep dive, meeting with everyone I can, and we do need a coalescing of the existing organizations and how we're helping people. And if we need a high access shelter, if we need 4, if we need small ones, big ones, where they should be, there's a lot to learn here. And I support this consulting that we're taking on, and in partnership with the county and Dogwood Health Trust, in learning some of this so that we can be better prepared and help people more appropriately. I don't support a tent encampment city because I don't think that is what's best for people. I believe people deserve shelter. And to the extent that we can provide that shelter, I don't want them in tents.
We have an encampment city right now because we don't have a managed camping facility, would be my argument.
All right, anyone else in this impromptu conversation that I started? Anyway, okay. Okay, we're now to the public comment portion of our agenda. Because we're back to being live and in person, we are allowing folks to waive their time to a single speaker. And so we have one of those on our agendas, and that allows that speaker to speak for 10 minutes. Otherwise, if you're just speaking solely as an individual, you will have up to 3 minutes. And are you keeping the timer tonight? Maggie, no one's hit the time yet, so I wasn't sure. Okay, Maggie is the enforcer around the clock. So the first person signed up to speak this evening is Sheila Surratt.
I don't have to say my name now, okay. Evil is real. Evil exists in Asheville. Officers are surrounded by it, and they do their best with what they have. Please remember that. This is from a former APD officer who made this quote on national TV. Why are city leaders refusing to protect the citizens of Asheville? City leaders have failed the citizens of Asheville. If you can't protect the citizens of Asheville, each of you all need to resign. Our city is a big trash dump, trash all over this city. Why are you all protecting these people, trashing the city, terrorizing people, throwing trash, needles, blankets, and sleeping bags all over downtown and throughout the city? We need a solution which city leaders refuse to come up with. I'm a native and take pride in my hometown. Unlike city leaders who choose to destroy Asheville, we are now the worst city in the entire state of North Carolina. Can you all explain why this city turned into a big trash dump? Your so-called leadership caused all of this. I have some slides, and I have no idea what I'm doing here. Thank you, Maggie. Oh, okay. I was going to talk first, and then I'm going to do the slides. Thank you. Okay, and then I just go right down here, and then move on, and then it goes on down. Okay, this has been going on way before COVID. This has been going on. How many years have I been coming to you all talking about how dirty this city is? I know at least for 5 years. Pritchard Park finally got cleaned up, and it took a lot of people to have concerns to clean that park up, and that part's going to, while I'm downtown Asheville, that part's going to stay clean, I assure you. I mean, this is unacceptable. This is left all day long. This is throughout all downtown. Look, this is the weekend. This was just taken this weekend. What's going to happen when we have SOCOM in town over the weekends and Billie Jean King tournament? You want them to see this dump all over the place? This is unacceptable. Look at this trash. Look, they just leave it all over the town. No one's in that sleeping bag. Look at that. You think this is acceptable? This is not even my bad photos. Some of them were too bad to show. Think this looks nice? No, this was at Pritchard Park 2 weeks ago. Police officers got called about drug activity, and I happened to walk by. So the guy shot up on the bench and just threw the needle underneath the bench at Pritchard Park, but the police officer did pick it up. I mean, this is nothing compared to what I could have shown. I mean, this is every single day. This is not before COVID. Well, we did, thanks to, is it Peggy Rowe, did get us a list of rules here. And then after 10 o'clock, they must be out of the park. I mean, I'm just telling you now, this is not acceptable. I mean, this is every single day, and these were just taken. So I'd just like to know, if you all do support the police, why did you defund the police to begin with? That don't make any sense if you don't support them. I mean, we need more police patrolling downtown. What are you gonna do when Billie Jean King comes here and those women in the tennis tournament? You want them to see the trash piled up outside the Civic Center? You think that's gonna look good for Asheville? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next person we have signed up to speak is Amy Cantrell.
city council women and city staff and neighbors. It's good to see you all. And first I want to thank you for leading in a very difficult time. This has been a very difficult time for humanity. And it's very hard to make decisions in a time that we can't even imagine what we were all going to be living through. I want to say that public policy decisions impact people's lives. They can cause people to thrive. They can cause whole communities to suffer. Nobody knows this more than our African American community. And so first I want to advocate strongly in support of East End neighbors, Renee White, who has done such heavy lifting in the city for so long, around the use of Memorial Stadium as a community park, and the need for health equity when it comes to spaces for recreation and exercise, the need for a track, a 6-lane track, and space to be in a community that so many were expelled from during urban renewal. And we heard about that with the Charlotte Street corridor tonight. So I want to speak really clearly about that. We can make a decision that can help a whole community to thrive, and we need to do that. It's the right thing to do. We have to stop doing harm in order to create and healing and reparations. And so let's do that. Let's do the right thing. The other thing I want to talk about is this public policy around 24-hour notice around eviction. Today I was with somebody who had fled domestic violence. There was no shelter for her, and she looked plaintively at me and said, "Where do I go?" And I said, "I don't know. We do not have enough shelter in this city, at least that I know of. Our shelters are full. We will have more people coming out to the streets at the end of March from the Ramada, from all the Code Purple shelters. That's over 100 more people that will be coming out to the streets. And we're asking our police department that has very little resources to begin with to move people every 24 hours potentially to where? To somewhere illegal for them to be. This is not smart public policy. It makes no rational sense, and we can do better. And I would love to talk about some short-term actions, and we're very excited about planning for long-term solutions. We know the things that we need in this community. Many of us have advocated for it for a long time. And thank you for talking about the cleanups. We have some people in this room that were a part of that cleanup group. We are doing another one this week. This has always been a part of our ethics to care for the commons. We want to be good neighbors. We want to create innovative solutions that we don't have yet. Homes with equity, shelter for all. Thank you.
And thank you for the cleanup effort. It was monumental. Thank you very much for that.
Much appreciated.
The next person I have signed up to speak is Jonathan Wainscott.
Since Maggie has to take a second to set up my PowerPoint, I just want to say hi and not take that out of my time. It's so nice to see everybody in person. You won't deduct that from my time, will you, Maggie?
Not till I get over there.
Okay, all right. Let's hear it from Maggie Burleson. All right, ready? It's been only 1 year since the Asheville Citizen-Times reported that our first Black alderman here in Asheville was Newton Shepard. He was elected in 1882 and served 1 year through 1883. And coincidentally, that is the year that 23-year-old Locke Craig moved to Asheville. He was a lawyer and became a heavy hitter in the Democratic political party. He served as the Asheville City Attorney and the Buncombe County Council. So he would have been here when Asheville had its first and only Black alderman, when we had a district election system, and that is what he looked like. And he would have been here in January of 1888 when the Asheville City School System was founded, and we had Isaac Dixon as on the board of that, first Black person to serve on that agency. He was here in July of 1888 when John Humphreys was lynched, and he served as counsel for the mobsters that lynched Hezekiah Rankin in 1891. In 1893, the Young Men's Institute opened up downtown, cultural center of black community. And just 1 year later after that, Zebulon Vance died. Locke Craig was quite a big fan of his. In August of 1897, let me back up. August of 1897, Bob Bratchett was lynched, being ripped out of the jail, or ripped off a train from in Swannanoa, but a jail break there. Just a couple months after that, we had the cornerstone of the Vance Monument was placed, and just a couple months after that, the Vance Monument was completed. On May 10th, Locke Craig gave a great speech, praising Zebulon Vance, and just 2 days later, Locke Craig and Charles Aycock were down in Laurinburg, North Carolina, announcing their intentions to restore North Carolina with white supremacy and redeem North Carolina to its pre-Confederate values with a grand democratic rally, extolling the virtues of white men and white metal, meaning silver, asked white men of all political faiths to join in the cause to redeem North Carolina, and that's what happened, apparently, in the election of 1898. This is the front page of the Asheville Citizen-Times, says North Carolina is redeemed. Democracy triumphant, white men will rule. Democracy triumphant, white men will rule. Asheville and Buncombe County in line. Further down from that article, Democratic Party Chairman J.D. Murphy and President D.M. Luther of the Zeb Vance Democratic Club were the recipients of many congratulations for the splendid success attending their management of the campaign. President Luther said to the Citizen, "I never felt so good about anything in my whole life. The entire Democratic organization in Asheville has been under the direction of the Zeb Vance Democratic Club, and the zealous work of its membership has brought about this magnificent result." So for those of you who need a primer on what our values were back then, that's what's up.
Thank you. Maggie, do you have to go back over there to, yeah, oh, Sarah with the, coming in. All right, hot, good. Okay, next I have signed up to speak is Doug Brown. And I see that Cliff Feingold, Alex Cobb, and Pepper Paris have ceded their time. If you three could just raise your hands. Thank you very much. And welcome, Mr. Brown. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. City Council, Honored Mayor, I am Doug Brown. And fellow citizens, fellow residents, our city's budget has increased over 9%.
Sorry, there's a camera and they're not going to be able to see you in the stream. So,
thank you.
Yes.
Our city council, our city's budget has increased over 9%. The word on the street is that our taxes are about to go up also. I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way. We have to make good decisions. One of the elephants, one of the biggest things, and we've been talking about it all night tonight, has been the cost of homelessness. When I looked at the COVID relief, the ARPA, there's $26 million. $6 million of that is going towards homeless items. That's 23% of our COVID money. When the Buncombe Budget Committee got together, they added up $10.2 million in homeless items, and that includes, of course, the ARPA $6 million. That is a lot of money. When I look at what is available and what we can do, our city council, as many other cities have done, has accepted the Housing First model. The Housing First model, in short, is let's get people in a safe, secure environment, or a home, room, and then on their own, they will work out their homelessness. What that means is that, and then at some point, the Obama administration approved, like I think it was 2009, that HUD-funded money would be allotted to cities that accepted this model. A lot of money flew in, a lot of cities accepted that. But like any federal funds, there's always a condition or strings attached. Part of the program is, as you maybe even know, is that if you have a Housing First program, it's low barrier, and that the residents are not obligated or required to have mental health treatment or to go through drug treatment. It's on their own. Well, how has this program worked out? Come with me down the rabbit hole a little bit of what happens when this program is played out. To apply or to be accepted in your Housing First program, first of all, you have to be homeless for a year or homeless for over 3 years, in and out, and so forth. All good and well. If you also have to have a disability. Well, I've read that 75% to 90% of the homeless people have a disability, because a disability includes drug addiction, it includes alcoholism, it includes mental health. So once you can qualify for that, then you can get your disability check. Once you get your disability check, you can qualify for Housing First living. But let's take it a little bit further. Once you get that check, a large percent of that check goes to the Housing First program. Let's call it days in. Now, that goes towards perhaps their utility, room and board, and so forth. Let's say that homeless person who's living in that facility wants cable TV, a cell phone, a new pair of tennis shoes. Where are they going to get the money to do that? Ultimately, they would like to get a job, perhaps, or a job would be where they go. But under this program, you cannot get a job, or you're going to lose your, what's it called? You're going to lose your eligibility for being being a disabled person. When you lose that, then of course you lose your housing. So how is a person who doesn't have enough money going to provide for himself for some of these things? And perhaps it's drugs or alcohol, because after all, the program does not require that they are obligated to those programs for recovery. How are they going to get that money? Crime increases, theft. We have panhandlers on the street. And then crime moves in. We've seen it in Ramada. That's a Housing First model where the homeless, and this is not about, I don't want to talk about like the homeless programs. This is about the money that we're spending. And the money that we're spending is tied to the Housing First program, because it's tied to federal money, it's tied to county money, it's tied to city money. And all that money is tax money. That's where it comes from. It's a very expensive program. So what can we do about this? We have some organizations in our city, in our backyard. It sounds like you've even talked to them. Some of these places, like the Western Carolina Rescue Center, when COVID hit and all the federal agencies were turned down, or homeless shelters were shut down, this organization fed up to 600 meals a day. It did not cost the city a cent. This organization today feeds 100 to 200 homeless people 2 meals a day, 5 days a week. And it does not cost the city a cent. It does not cost the taxpayer a cent. We have another program. And plus, they have about 100 residents in their house that are going through their program, that are stabilized, that are working, and getting fed 3 meals a day. And it doesn't cost the city or the taxpayer a cent. I've also talked to ABCCM. They have 2 of the largest homeless shelters in the city, perhaps the whole state. They have a model that has been hugely successful. In fact, 40% of the homeless are supposed to be in their facilities. That's the veterans. Now, what if they could take care of the other 60% of the civilians that are not being given to them? We would have a great solution here. And they are completely self-sustainable. They do not require any money from the city or from the taxpayer. And yet we've got $10.2 million allocated towards this homeless situation. It's like we're in the hotel acquisition and renovation business. And the model is broken. Look at Ramada Inn, what happened when there was a low barrier and anybody could come in. People are put into a room, an isolated room, surrounded by other people that are homeless that have addiction problems. Then they are, they're not treated for their trauma unless they want to. It's on your own. Because there's so many people concentrated in one area, we found that the drug dealers came in, the prostitution. We found that it took a lot of, we had stolen cars recovered. We had deaths there. Other cities we can look at with this housing first model are Los Angeles, San Francisco. They're a disaster and they're extremely expensive. We should see them as canaries in the coal mine that are telling Asheville, get out, get away, don't do this. ABCCM has a program where the first thing they do is they stabilize the person, take care of their traumas. Next, they take care of their addictions, whatever it is. Next, they get them training because they're connected with AB Tech. And then they get them out on their own. And generally, this takes less than 6 months. When we talk about permanent sustainable living, which is the housing first model, boy, if they could keep their permanent sustainable housing down to 6 months, that would be a boon. But why aren't we talking to them? They're not taking any COVID money. They don't need any city money. They don't need any taxpayer money. They would save us a lot of money, and they're very successful. And in fact, people from around the nation come to ABCCM and to the rescue mission to find out why they're so successful. And yet the city council is hiring a consulting firm to come in? How many hundreds of thousands of dollars is that going to cost? $250,000? $500,000? This is why we need to make
Just
good
to clarify, Dogwood Endowment is paying that. I just want to correct that misinformation since the public is listening.
All right, thank you. So the consulting fee is being paid by somebody else.
By Dogwood Endowment.
But regardless, who are they going to talk to? They're going to talk to the people that are successful in treating the homeless. Why don't you talk to them? Why don't you work with them? I know they're faith-based. As a matter of fact, a former city council member told me, Doug, C stands for Christian. I worked with the point of contact with Ryan Husky, I think it is. There were a lot of faith-based people there. We didn't say a prayer, but we met in a church. My point is that we need to work with these people.
Thank you.
They have the solution, and they can save us some money. So please reach out to them. Thank you.
We struggle a little bit because we're not supposed to, this is a time for public comment and we're not going to respond to each and every speaker, but I will assure you that we are working with all those providers. There is open communication. So I just want to make sure that's clear just so anyone listening to this doesn't think otherwise. And we do have ARPA asks actually from some of the organizations you mentioned. So just to clarify that point as well. But I have another person signed up to speak. I'm not sure if she's still here. Is Rachel Bliss still here? Oh, you are. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Good evening. I've come here tonight because I'm concerned the way journalists are treated in our community. I'm referring to the Aston Park episode where 2 journalists working with the Asheville Blade were arrested before anyone else was arrested that night. It's like they were victims of the guy that came on Christmas, what's his name? The Grinch. The Grinch that stole Christmas. And I am the mother of one of those journalists. That journalist comes from a family of writers. Both her father and her mother went to the University of Iowa School of Journalism. And we are very upset that the city did not pay attention to the freedom of the press, our First Amendment. And there's a court date coming up. My daughter had her hands, she was handcuffed for 3 hours after her arrest because she wanted to report the news. Her backpack was confiscated. I don't know if she has it back yet. Her phone was confiscated. This is no way to treat the press in our city. I know that we have different viewpoints from all our newspapers. You have maybe the Tribune paper on one side, you have the Mountain Express on the other side. Both of these are journalists, and they have different viewpoints, but you don't treat one differently than you treat the other. So I suggest that these charges be dropped immediately. This is very unfair to our press. It does not show Asheville in a clean light. We're talking about cleaning up our city. Let's clean up the way we treat our journalists. You don't have to agree with the viewpoints of that particular media, but you do need to give them respect. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Rebecca Morrison.
Hey, good evening, everyone. A couple of things. I want to parrot a little bit of what Amy Cantrell said, and I support the use of the ARPA funds to help build the track at the East End Valley Street Memorial Stadium. It's been a long time coming, and I think as a city, this is something that we can do for our marginalized community members to really benefit health and racial equity. We want to talk about reparations. This is a solid thing that we can do in that direction. Another thing is that I want to urge you to find even more ways to put funding and resources, even social services, shelter for our unhoused, unsheltered community. I also urge you to stop criminalizing houselessness and going out and destroying, I know it's not you all specifically, but supporting any policies where folks' shelter is destroyed. I feel like the mentality of seeing unhoused folks at this time as like an issue instead of the circumstances that lead to houselessness as a issue, as the problem, or the situation of houselessness as the problem. It feels like a lot of that mentality is what drives like the city's policies, and the new APD policy feels like a really good new example of that mentality. I think that the RFP for a homeless services consultant is a great step in the right direction, and I would love to see a proposal that specifically addresses racial equity needs, especially since a disproportionate amount of our houseless community are people of color. And yeah, just again to say that I think we should continue to prioritize and grow the aid to folks in our community who are experiencing houselessness. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Miranda Norland. So we have, two more.
Good evening, Council. Firstly, just thank you all for your work. I know that there is a lot of care and thought and deep concern for our city that goes into how y'all each show up. And so thank you for that energy, even though I likely don't agree with some of y'all on various different things. I appreciate your energy and commitment. I am a longtime resident of Asheville. I've grown up here my entire life. And I want to echo some of the other comments this evening, and just a general concern for the ways that I feel like our policy and the movement of our city is oriented increasingly towards tourism, oriented increasingly towards whatever facade that we're putting up for the outside folks who are coming here, and neglecting the residents or deprioritizing the folks who live here. And I would just like to urge y'all, one way that we can move against that is to support ARPA funds to support the track being built at East End Community and Memorial Stadium, a 6-lane track. That is something that has been in the works for a really long time. And so I'd like to voice my support for that investment and demonstration of actual commitment towards reparations, demonstration towards actual commitment and care for people who live here. Another way that I think we can show care for the people who live here is to move towards more compassionate responses to our neighbors who are experiencing houselessness. I know there's been a lot of conversation about that tonight. We're still seeing recommendations from the CDC that when folks are camping somewhere, we let them camp there, that pushing them from place to place to place is just going to aggravate our pandemic, harm people. And so it was kind of heartbreaking to see that we're devoting more police resources to moving folks constantly with a 24-hour notice from what I understand was a 7-day notice of movement. I'm not entirely sure like how one would have, like how do you respond if you're told that you need to move, you're told you need to take everything that you own and shift it again and again and again when there aren't resources that our officers can tell folks to go to. Like my understanding is that there is insufficient shelter for folks to go to. And so if we're just pushing people again and again and again, that leads to even less stability, leads to even less ability to build relationships and stability. Thank you.
Grace Martinez. Yeah, our old model was to just, yeah, we're just, sorry, we're rusty here.
Good evening, Council. I came here tonight to talk about this infamous slide from the January 11th City Council meeting, which went on to be publicized in our local news organizations, including Asheville Citizen Times, WLOS, and Mountain Express, because they trusted the information given by Captain Mike Lamb's portion of the city manager's report. When I first saw this slide, I remembered a lesson I learned at Asheville High in Mr. Burke's statistics class my senior year. Correlation does not equal causation. But I needed someone with actual expertise, so I enlisted the help of data science consultant Nicholas Pearson to dive into the claims that Officer Lamb made with this slide. You can follow along by going to Linktree/Asheville data, that's linktr.ee/Asheville data. He first found definitively that the supposed crime hotspots nearby unhoused encampments could just as easily be replicated by any number of Asheville businesses as locations for a crime radius. By the same methodology the police used here, it could be said that businesses like Chick-fil-A, Tupelo Honey, and High Five Coffee were the cause of crime too. In other words, these numbers are just plain wrong. Additionally, these numbers represented anywhere from duplicate to hextuple counts of arrests due to overlapping radiuses, resulting in an estimated 25% overcount in the 500-foot radius and a whopping 107% overcount of the 1,000-foot data. What resulted is a completely inaccurate fear-mongering slide that was widely distributed throughout our community as fact. Can you imagine the headline, Asheville businesses account for 27% of local arrests? That would be libelous. And yet, Asheville Police Captain Mike Lamb was permitted to present blatant misinformation in front of council, our community, and our local press. The police have started with the narrative they were trying to support and quite literally put data around it. This presentation came after, as we recall, multiple people being arrested on Christmas Day, including 2 journalists. The police made a policy change that they then began enforcing before it even existed, to change the 7-day camp removal policy to anywhere between immediately to 24 hours. In what order are we doing business here, Council? Are we looking at the data and then creating policy around it? Or are we creating false data to support policies that police have already started to enforce but have yet to enact? We have a transparency problem that needs to be adjusted immediately, and we need to fact-check information before releasing bunk data to the public that uplifts false police narratives that we use to justify cracking down on our unhoused neighbors, activists, mutual aid groups, and the journalists covering these injustices. I hope the news outlets who unwittingly publish this misinformation correct it publicly. I encourage the media and community to look at the data that Nicholas Pearson generously put out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have one final person signed up to speak, Carrie Petler. Were you on? Oh, sorry, I didn't realize, okay, sorry, I didn't read the form right. Carrie, Nina, you're up. Sorry, I will, I better understand the form next time. Sorry.
Good evening again. It is indeed a pleasure to be here in person with folks. There's really no equivalent to being in the presence of the people that you're listening to, getting all the visual cues that we delight in when we interact in person. However, a significant portion of people who care about what happens at City Council simply can't attend for one reason or another. During the time when we were holding meetings virtually, it was because of COVID. Well, for many of us, COVID may still be a consideration. For folks whose schedules don't line up easily with transportation to get here in person, that also is a hardship. And the need to sign up in advance, whether it's in person or online, and the lack of ability to comment spontaneously, particularly if you're virtual, leaves people without an opportunity to interact with topics of urgency and immediacy. For me, the big issue here is democracy, and democracy that does not facilitate participation is not really democracy. People don't feel that their government is legitimate when they don't have input into it and when they can't participate in its deliberations. Council should be facilitating people's participation. We have the technology for this. Yes, it'll be a pain to make it work, but companies all over the country and the world are hosting hybrid meetings all the time where people can sign in and participate on short notice, where the agenda is available and the technology is available for them to participate remotely. I urge Council to seriously consider seeking out and adopting the technology which will allow hybrid meetings where those who are fortunate enough to participate in person can be heard, but where those who cannot, for whatever reason, come in person, have an equal voice in Council deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We don't have anyone else signed up to speak, so we are concluded, unless there's any other announcements. Any other? Okay, we are adjourned.